Yep, I, Sienna Miller, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you confirm to the inquiry, please, your full name?
Yeah, my name is Sienna Rose Diana Miller.
And you've provided a contract address through your solicitors.
Yes.
And you voluntarily provided the inquiry with a witness statement.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the contents of your witness statement?
I am.
And are the contents of your witness statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Good morning, Miss Miller.
Good morning.
We've heard from a large number of witnesses who've already given evidence to this inquiry about the experiences they've had with press photographers and paparazzi, and people who gave examples of such things as photographers camped outside their homes, being stalked wherever they go, jumping out at them without warning and driving dangerously, and so on. Are these examples which are familiar to you in terms of your experiences?
Yes, they are.
Can you give the inquiry just a little bit of an idea of what you have personally experienced in that regard?
Yeah, well, at the time, I actually now have an order against paparazzi, so my life has changed dramatically. But for a number of years, I was relentlessly pursued by about 10 to 15 men, almost daily, pretty much daily. And, you know, anything from being spat at or verbally abused. I think that the incentive is really to get as strong a reaction as possible. So, you know, as other people have mentioned, but being jumped out at when you get a shock or saying things to kind of get some emotional reaction, they seem to go to any lengths to try to upset you, which was really difficult to deal with.
We've heard a lot about driving. Have you had any experiences of sort of dangerous driving around you?
Yeah, I'm highly illegal driving, overtaking, undertaking. There was a near incident that the police were informed of where a pregnant lady was nearly knocked down. But this was a daily occurrence, people riding in motorcycles alongside a vehicle and while taking photographs and at high speed, and it causes you to drive dangerously and them to drive dangerously with really very little regard for anyone else on the road, and it's all in pursuit of relatively little. I mean, often these people have taken a photograph of you and are just desperate to kind of find out where you're going next, even, you know, regardless of whether it's a meeting or some kind of inane event. It's just pursued. I think there's something about the pursuit which is very exciting for paparazzi photographers.
Can you just give us a little idea of what it feels like to be the victim of that kind of pursuit?
Well, it's really terrifying. It's terrifying not only for the person experiencing it, but for friends who are with me, family members who are with me, for the people driving the cars. And, you know, I would often find myself, I was 21, at midnight running down a dark street on my own with 10 big men chasing me. And the fact that they had cameras in their hand meant that that was legal. But if you take away the cameras, what have you got? You've got a pack of men chasing a woman, and obviously that's a very intimidating situation to be in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've explained that what you did about it was you got an order from the court. I think that was in, I should know, that was in the summer of 2008.
Yeah.
And I think you said, but just to be clear, what happened, if anything, as a result of getting that order? Well,
it went from having 20 people outside my house every day to 0. So I can now lead a relatively private and normal life, which is fantastic. But it was a long and arduous and exhausting struggle to get there.
Was it an easy decision to take to bring an action against newsgroup newspapers?
No, not at all. I was very nervous of taking on an empire that was richer and far more powerful than I will ever be. But then I saw the evidence that I obtained from the police and felt that I couldn't not do something about it. But it was very daunting.
You've had your fill of having to instruct lawyers. Can you explain why it is that you're giving evidence to this inquiry?
Because you made me.
All right. Well, I hope you don't blame me afterwards. What do you hope to achieve by giving evidence to this inquiry?
I hope that some form of change comes to our media. You know, there are very respectable and fantastic journalists in this country, and they're all bracketed under the same name of the press, and I think that's not fair, given the grand differences between publications. So I hope that some change can come, and therefore I'm actually very happy to be giving evidence.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barr has some questions for you.
Could I take you to paragraph 4 of your witness statement, please?
Yeah.
Where you describe that during this period, almost every week, extremely personal matters were being published, including parts of private conversations. And my question to you is, how did that make you feel about those around you?
Well, initially, I'm very lucky. I have a very tight group of friends and a very supportive family, and to this date, no one has ever sold a story on me, regardless of the fact that several people, even acquaintances, have been offered large sums of money to do so. So I felt very protected. But it was baffling how certain pieces of information kept coming out. And the first initial steps I took were to change my mobile number. And then I changed it again and again. I ended up changing it 3 times in 3 months. And stories still continued to come out with very private information that only a select group of people knew about. And so naturally, having changed my number and being pretty convinced that it couldn't have been as a result of hacking, even though that was my suspicion, I accused my friends and family of selling stories, and they accused each other as well.
Again, at paragraph 7 of your witness statement, where you describe one occasion where you sat down your family and friends in a room and accused them of leaking stories to the press.
Yeah.
Because a story had come out that only they knew about.
Yeah, there was one particular very private piece of information that 4 people knew about. And I'd been very careful to only tell my mother, my sister, and 2 of my closest friends.
Yeah.
And a journalist had phoned up saying that they knew about this. And so, yes, I accused my family and people who would never dream of selling any sort of information on me. I accused them, someone in that room, of selling a story.
We now know that, in fact, your phones were being hacked.
Yes, this was the fact that they had this piece of information was as a result of accessing my phone messages and those of people around me.
So how does it make you feel now, knowing that you were driven to make the accusations against your friends and family as a result of phone hacking?
Well, understandably, really angry, and I feel terrible that they would even consider accusing people of betraying me like that, especially people who I know would rather die than betray me. But it just seemed so intensely paranoid to assume that your house is bugged or you're being listened to somehow. It just seemed so extreme, especially considering that I changed my number so many times and it still happened that I couldn't think of an alternative. But, it's really upsetting for them and for myself that I accused them.
And what would you say to those who did this?
I don't think it would be appropriate in court.
Well, I won't press you then.
I would, I think it's understandable. It's just outrageous. It's kind of unfathomable to feel like that you're justifiable in behaving that way, I think. And the ramifications on people's lives are very rarely considered by the people who are doing it. I think the effect that it had on my life was really damaging to me and to my family and friends.
In particular, you talk about journalists and photographers would often turn up in meeting places that you'd arranged on the phone and nobody else knew about. And that you had men sitting outside your house and you were convinced that they were somehow listening to your private conversations. Could I ask you perhaps to develop on just the scale of the impact on your life that these events had?
Well, to be honest, it made it very difficult to leave the house. I did feel constantly very scared and intensely paranoid. I've kind of touched on it all, really, but to the degree I had with my publicist, we had a separate number that we would only speak to each other on that number. And subsequently I found out that Glenn Mulcair had that number as well. So just every area of my life was under constant surveillance, and instinctually I felt that and felt very violated and very paranoid and anxious constantly.
You tell us that you found photographers and journalists turning up at places where I thought I could avoid media intrusion.
Yeah.
Presumably, as a very famous actress, you were well used to being photographed in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
But are we here talking about circumstances in which you were hoping to have some privacy?
I think there wasn't a circumstance that existed where I wasn't hoping to have some form of privacy, but you know, obviously in certain situations that was impossible. I think what was more baffling was the fact that people found out before I'd even arrived where I was going. And so that feeling of people knowing absolutely everything about you was, as I said before, really intimidating and scary and confusing. I didn't understand how they knew, but I felt like I was living in some sort of video game. And people kind of preempting every move I made, obviously as a result of accessing my private information.
Were photographs taken of you published accurately, or were they altered? I understand there's a particular example you'd like to tell the inquiry about.
I mean, there were several examples of, I think a story can really tell a picture, but often can tell us, sorry, that didn't make sense.
The other way round.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in this particular situation, I'm the ambassador of a children's charity for terminally and seriously ill children, and I was at their annual ball, fundraising ball, where many of the children were, and many people who were donating money, raising money, etc. And there was a very sick child that I was playing with in a corner of the room, who was pretending to shoot me, and I was pretending to die, which was, you know, we were playing a game, and somebody took a photograph, and the mirror cut the boy out of the photograph and said that I was drunk. And obviously, looking at these photographs, they look, you know, it's almost amusing. It looks awful, it looks shocking. And they were aware at the time of the situation, the real situation that I was in. And so I obviously complained, I sued, I won. They printed an apology that was minuscule and sort of irrelevant a few days later. But by that point, the damage is done. If anybody in my line of work sees this photograph and hears that I was behaving as they suggested at a charity event, it's just detrimental to my career, to my reputation. And I think this is sort of the problem. There's, you know, the fact that they knew that they would be sued and have to pay damages was really not enough of a deterrent in certain situations within the media. And you know, this was.
This article should not go on the website. There is absolutely no reason to do it, and I'm not prepared to republicise that which has happened.
Did the fact that these articles were being attributed to pals and close friends fuel the suspicions about your friends that you've described earlier?
Of course, especially when the information coming out was very similar to that which I'd said to specific people.
And to those who wrote these articles, under whose bylines they appear, do you think that it is ethical to give a false attribution to a story?
No, absolutely
not.
Not
A difficult question to answer.
No, sir.
I mean, but often journalists, they would be written by anonymous journalists. They wouldn't print their names, which was just another, almost an admission from their part that it was unethical.
Paragraph 12 of your witness statement, you say that you discovered that it wasn't only you, but lots of people close to you who had been put under surveillance, and that Mr. Mulcair had created a project under your name.
Yes.
How did you feel when you found out that the intrusion had gone beyond you to those around you?
I felt terrible. I mean, these were people who had never done anything remotely public, who had been under constant surveillance by this man. And it just seemed very crude, looking at the notes, these handwritten, you know, having initially been told that there was no evidence and then receiving a stack of evidence, handwritten notes, with dates referring to very personal things within my life. All my telephone numbers, the 3 that I changed in 3 months, my access numbers, PIN numbers, my password for my email that was actually used to later hack my email in 2008, was on these notes. And then, as you said, a number of my friends, I think about 10 phone numbers in total. So there was just this web of surveillance, which obviously makes it very easy to understand how they were getting all of this information. Everyone close to me was being monitored and electronically listened to.
What was your aim in taking action against the media? Were you, News International in particular, Newsgroup News, were you seeking financial compensation, or did you have some other purpose?
No, it was not about financial compensation. I would rather have not gone through any of the litigation that I've had to go through. No, not for financial gain. I wanted to understand the extent of the information that they had on me. I wanted to know who knew about all this information, everyone who had access to my telephone numbers, who had been listening to me. I mean, it's that feeling of knowing people are talking about you behind your back or watching you and not being able to confront it. It's very frustrating. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it.
Your civil claim was successful, and did you think that the court procedures provided an adequate remedy for you?
No. I'm still waiting for the full disclosure, which is the only thing I really want from News International, and so far it's been very unsatisfactory what I've received. Yeah, I will continue to wait for it, but it's been a long process so far.
Could I take you now, please, finally to the end of your statement and paragraph 18. But are you able to give us some insight about the type of damage that was done?
It's really hard to kind of to quantify in words. It's more the state of mind that you're in as a result of that level of intrusion and surveillance and interception, which is just complete anxiety and paranoia. And I realise, having watched the testimonies of people this week, that there are far more severe cases of this with the Dowlers and the McCanns, and it's alarming what's happened. And comparative to my life, this was too much to deal with, and I had to fight tooth and nail constantly to gain the freedom which I've managed to acquire now. The relationships that were damaged, I mean, just this kind of breeding of mistrust amongst all of us. And it wasn't just me accusing people, it was my mother accusing people, people accusing my mother. It was this, you know, nobody could understand how this information was coming out. So everybody was just very upset and confused and felt very violated by this constant barrage of information that was being published. It was impossible to lead any kind of normal life at that time. And that was really difficult for a young girl.
Thank you. Those were all my questions.
Okay.
What you could put it is this way, is it? That it is important to identify who has done wrong, but it is equally important to exonerate all those who have done absolutely no wrong.
Yes.
Yes, well, I understand. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I know you've got a busy life, and I'm very grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.